Before we went to market, I wasn't even aware that you could sell a company. So once I learned that, no, you can sell a company for a multiple, and it can be a really good way to build wealth. From day one, I started it knowing that eventually I want to sell this business. And that was in my mind 15 to 20 years down the road.
And I've said this to people on many occasions. There's a difference between building a company for income and building a company for wealth.
If you're just a business owner, a great entrepreneur, and you've been running this business successfully for 20 years, you're great at what you're doing. But what you haven't done is sold a business. And if you think you can do that, well, I grew this thing, I can sell it, that's a piece of cake. It's really not. It's a whole different world. They may give him a deal, but it would require him to stay on and run the company. And now you've got a boss with a little money, but that's a big trade-off. And that's
a little bit of money and a big headache.
Welcome to CEOs Unscripted, the podcast where real talk drives real growth and delivers real results for mid-market leaders like you. I'm your host, Jane Gentry, and each week we're pulling back the curtain on the unfiltered stories of CEOs, founders, and executives who face the highs and lows and everything in between. After 20 years of consulting in enterprise and then experiencing firsthand the reality of being a CEO in a mid-sized company, I discovered why they say it's loneliest at the top. For most mid-market CEOs, there's no handbook. You learn through trial and error or by reaching outside your organization for help. That's exactly why I created CEOs Unscripted, a bi-weekly podcast by mid-market CEOs for mid-market CEOs. Each episode offers an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at the wins, the losses, and the playbooks shared by CEOs and founders who've been where you are. No fluff, no jargon, just unscripted, honest conversations about what it takes to lead, grow, and scale in today's business landscape. If you're ready for candid conversations, real-world insights, and lessons from leaders who've walked the path, you're in the right place. So grab a seat at the table because it's time to get real. This is CEOs Unscripted.
Welcome back to CEOs Unscripted. Today, I am happy to welcome Jonathan Sherrill with Waypoint Founders and the author of The Extraordinary Exit. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jane. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you and can't wait to hear your story. So typically, Jonathan, the way we begin is I ask, just give me the kind of the short version of your background and how you got to where you are, and skip the stuff we can see on LinkedIn or on your website.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a little town on the west coast of Florida called Horseshoe Beach, and middle of nowhere, no red lights, no grocery stores, 18 miles from the nearest town. And that's where I grew up. I worked for my dad when I was 14, started helping him in his metal roofing manufacturing business. And I worked there until I was about 28 years old. And from that point, I helped my dad sell his business to a private equity and ran that company for them for another 6 years, and left there and started my own business back in 2018. And 3.5 years later, I started the process of going through a sale process, which took 12 months from the time I started till we exited, and had a really good exit. I was able to move back home to Florida. And
where were you?
2 years later, wrote the book called The Extraordinary Exit.
Now you moved back to Florida. Where did you end up?
Yes, I moved to Georgia to start my company, Quick and Steel, in 2018.
And you left us to go back to Florida.
I did. Yeah, I went back home.
I don't get it. I love Georgia. I don't know why you'd leave.
It's a great state. It's just not home.
Interesting. Okay, so you've been through 2 exits. Really, you helped your dad with one, and you've been through one on your own. You worked for PE. Super interesting. What would you say was different about the second exit, considering what you may or may not have learned from the first exit?
When my dad went through the process in 2010, I was the general manager for the company and was running, the day-to-day operations. And I handled the sales side for him. And so all the communications and things I was involved in, all the due diligence I was involved in, and kind of in charge of making sure we got a good deal. And I learned so much from that process that I had no idea before. Before we went to market, I wasn't even aware that you could sell a company. That's how back in the woods we were. So once I learned that, no, you can sell a company for a multiple, and it can be a really good way to build wealth. It kind of bit me. And from that point forward, I kind of devoured everything private equity, M&A, books, and things I could get my hands on, and was really intrigued with it. And when I went to work for private equity, running that same business as the president, I got a firsthand experience of what an investor is looking for. And they were making that very clear to me every week, what they're looking for.
Yeah, I've been there.
We built that thing to be an approved business for them and to function the way that private equity expects it to function. So very different in many ways, very financial reporting focused, very system and operations and flow driven. A lot of great things I learned and became part of how I operate. A lot of things I learned how not to operate as well. And so I took that knowledge, and when I started my company, from day one, I started it knowing that eventually I want to sell this business. And that was in my mind 15 to 20 years down the road. Little did I know it would be 3.5 years later, but it was built to sell. And that's one thing that was different about that exit. And another thing that was very different, even with all of that preparation and having a company, it was much bigger even than the one my dad sold. It took us, from the time I reached out to my sell side advisor and started the process, it took us a full 12 months. And my dad's deal took 3 months. So that was my grid for what to expect timeline wise. So very different. I had to really readjust my expectations and lean on my sell side advisor and trust that he knew what he was doing, which he very much did. And as a result of waiting and really taking it very seriously and preparing properly with guidance from my coach and from my sell side advisor, we got twice the return of what we expected. So we doubled the price, if you will, at the end of the day by going through that process.
Yeah. So two things resonate with me about that. One is, and I've said this to people on many occasions, there's a difference between building a company for income and building a company for wealth. And too many owners don't realize they're building a company for income. And because they're taking a good income home, they believe they have a valuable company. That's not always the case. I was just sitting with somebody yesterday and talking about selling his company that he had an offer, but he's way too involved in the business. The business can't run without him. And so, I said, ultimately, that deal will die because you are too important to the business. And they might not have said that to you yet, but they also haven't done their due diligence yet.
Right.
A lot changes in due diligence, right?
So very true. And they may give him a deal, but it would require him to stay on and run the company. And now you've got a boss with a little money, but that's a big trade-off. And that's
a little bit of
really
money and a big headache. Yeah. The other thing that you said that resonates, Jonathan, is having a group, the right group of advisors. So who was on your advisory team when you sold your business?
Sure. Great question. And just to kind of frame it up, there's all different size companies, right? And there's all different situations, but you have to have a great team, whatever that team needs to look like, right? So for me, we're a manufacturing business. We're very fast growth. We were doing, in the year we sold, the trailing 12 months were almost $40 million in revenue, just to give you some perspective on that. And I had a coach who was not my advisor. So that was
business
number
coach,
one. Business coach. Yes.
Business coach. Okay.
Executive coach. Yeah. CEO coach.
Okay.
And he was very vital to this. He introduced me to my sell-side advisor, who became my co-author of the book, actually. And so I had my coach, my sell-side advisor. Then I had to hire basically an auditor, an outside CPA firm, to come in and do what we call a quality of earnings audit. And so that was outsourced team that we worked with from pretty much about 3 months in all the way to the end. They were involved. Then I had to I lost my accounting team about 6 months into this process, which was pretty wild. Lost 2 people. One was a director level, very key person to the business success. And so that was quite a shock. I mean, we're going full steam ahead. She wasn't even aware yet that we were selling, but just the growth and the clash with some of the other leadership, she just decided she didn't want to be there. And her helper went with her because they kind of came in together and they went out together. So, so that was, because of that, I had to hire an outsourced accounting team and an outsourced, basically a whole team to handle all things accounting, including payroll and HR and things like that were handled by that role. So you never know what you're going to run into. And that's something I didn't expect. So I had to hire for that. And also from that same company, the outsourced company, I hired a fractional CFO just for the deal. So that was to prepare financials and to really provide strategic finance support throughout the process. And he was involved also with the management presentations when we sat down with interested buyers. So there was that. And I ended up hiring a presentation coach for me so that I was prepared when I went to sit down with these buyers, and not just sitting down in person when we got really serious, but even to talk to interested potential buyers, which was multiple Zoom calls, and then ended up in being, 4 different in-person meetings, half-day meetings apiece when we sat down with the finalists. So that was another one. And then the other part was the wealth management company that I had to hire and work with and pre-plan the exit, the post-exit funds and what to do and kind of strategy there. And of course, a great deal attorney, not just your local guy that sets you up with your LLC and your company agreements, but really needs to be a deal M&A specialist that knows what they're doing, attorney. Yeah. So that was the other one that we had. And all of them had to work together, get along very well, and have one common goal. And if you get great people in those roles, then it can make the deal so much better. You get a much better deal. It gives your buyers confidence that this is a legitimate business, this is a legitimate group, and I better show up and be ready to put on my best game, both with offers and just the whole thing. And so if it's done right, that's what you'll get if you have a good company that you're presenting.
Who drove? Who is the lead on that team?
The sell-side advisor is basically the quarterback in charge.
Okay. And was that any different than what you did when you sold your dad's company? Did you do anything differently the second time based on what you learned from the first time?
Yeah, well, looking back after I helped him sell I actually helped him sell another much smaller business also before I sold mine. And I had a lot of friends and people I knew that had sold their companies as well. And I saw how people were getting taken advantage of, and they were hiring business brokers, advisors that really were not putting their heart and soul into the deal. They were just looking at the numbers and basically sending it out to every private equity firm they could think of. And if some were interested, they would bring them in, and just really no effort to kind of get the business prepared, put together a really great, compelling CIM, we call it, confidential information memo, which basically tells the full story of the business and the uniqueness of it and where it can add strategic value and synergies, instead of just, here's the numbers, here's the business, here's what they do. Are you interested in buying it? So that's what a lot of brokers tended to do. And looking back and talking with some of these people, you find that there were millions of dollars left on the table. And in many cases,
I've seen the same thing, Jonathan. Just bad advisors, or not the right advisors. Or I have a friend who sold a business and they're going to give me advice. This is your heart and soul. I mean, this is where you've put all of your money and your sweat. You really should arm yourself with the best team possible. I mean, this is not the place to cut corners, right?
Absolutely. And I think a piece of this, it's if I put myself in the founder's seat, maybe they don't have the same experience that I do, that having helped someone sell and work for private equity and all that, and studied this space a lot. If you're just a business owner, a great entrepreneur, and you've been running this business successfully for 20 years, you're great at what you're doing. But what you haven't done is sold a business. And if you think you can do that, well, I grew this thing, I can sell it, that's a piece of cake. It's really not. It's a whole different world. And if I had it to do over again, I would still never go it alone. If I sold 6 companies, I would still always get that top-notch sell-side advisor first and foremost. I would still have a coach. 100%. And it's just, I hate to see people getting taken advantage of. And, someone listening to this could say, that sounds good, but it's scary because I don't know where to start. How do I know if they're good? How do I find a good one? Right? Things like that. And so that's where, that's what I do now, is I help people work through all of that stuff, work through all the personal side of it. And also I connect people with great advisors, and there's nothing in it for me, but I make sure that, or I'll interview the one they got or the one they're thinking about working with, and give them my honest take on that. Right. And so I think that's figuring out a starting place is a barrier for a lot of people, and that can keep them stuck for years waiting to decide when to sell. They know they want to, but when you know you want to, and the timing is, I should be doing it now, I just don't know where to start, that's when you need some help. And there are people like myself out there to help navigate that.
Yeah, a couple things there. One, don't wait till you're exhausted and you're like, I got to get out of this thing to start.
Yep.
You won't have time to do the prep work that you probably haven't done, that you don't realize that you need to do, right?
Or have the energy to do it once you finally do.
Or you won't have the energy. Number 2, this is where having a great network helps you to find these folks. But
it's true.
You and I think we talked about this statistic, and I think we agreed it's probably higher than either of us even know, is that I thought it was like 90%, Jonathan, of founders who sell their business within 18 months, I might have my numbers wrong, and I'm going to let you correct me, are very unhappy with their business. I mean, let's face it, you can only fish and golf so much, right? And then you're like, what now? So they're either unhappy with the deal they got and believe that they could have done better on the deal, or they just were not mentally and emotionally prepared for who they are outside of that business. You know, a lot of us are very defined by who we are in our business. And there's a lot of emotional pre-work that really should get done in anticipation of selling your business. But most sell-side advisors, that's not what's on their radar, right? What's on their radar is getting you a great deal.
Yeah.
And unless you've got somebody that's been through it, like you or my partner, Pat, who will tell you the same thing, the emotional part of it is as important or more important than the financial part of it. How would you comment on that?
I can speak from my own experience and totally agree with what you're saying. When I exited, my exit why, which is one of the first things to figure out, and to go very deep on that and get really grounded and figure out what's the underlying core, very emotional reason that you're wanting to sell your business, that why. And that's the kind of work that I help people figure out. Once that's established, and it was very established for me, it was personal. My daughter, I needed to be there for her. And that's something I talk openly about, no secret, but she was diagnosed with autism at 2. She was 12 at the time I decided to sell. I had a very strong urge, you might say, intuition that the next 5 years are critical to her development. And I wasn't able to give her what she needed in the current state in Georgia, literally, and also just the way I was having to grind and spend so much time on the business. So it was just kind of a knowing that I've got to do this. And so with that, and also with my experience seeing lots of friends and people exit their businesses and see how things were afterward, and they had the tendency, a lot of them, to jump straight into something else and made it almost worse than before they sold, right? Just owning companies that were underperforming, that they weren't qualified to be in. So there's a lot of temptations to jump to fill that void. And so I knew all this going into it, and sold, moved back home to Florida, was doing everything that I wanted to do for my family, for my daughter. All that was great. But about, 3-4 months in, I'm still taking care of my family. Everything is great, but that don't require me 24 hours a day. And so I'm sitting there Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., and there's nothing on my calendar. There's no phone ringing. The inbox is empty, but LinkedIn is showing you the industry is still full steam ahead, and all your people you used to work with and connections, they're moving on. And though you're grateful that you was able to, in my case, have a great exit and take care of your family forever, well, there's still a void. There's still an emotional void, and the tendency is to fill that in that vacuum. And that's a very dangerous place to be in if you don't prepare ahead of time.
That's that thing. I see people on LinkedIn all the time who I know are retired. And I think to myself, what on earth are you doing honey, I will not be checking LinkedIn when I'm retired. But it is that missing. Yeah. That sense of missing out, that sense of community that you got rid of. My partner, Pat, I've said this multiple times, he had an amazing exit, like you. He is the absolute worst retired person I have ever met. The guy works harder than I do.
Yeah.
That's just what motivates him, right?
Yeah.
Not out of a need of making an income, but of a need of making a difference. And I hear that same thing from you, Jonathan. And so let's move into kind of what is it that, in any order, the two things I want to make sure we cover is what was the impetus for the book and what's in the book, without giving too much away because we want people to read it. But what are you doing now as you are kind of maybe in an in-between stage between what you were doing and what you may be doing someday?
Yeah. About 2 years after I sold the company, I was asked to speak at a couple events that were for business owners, really focused on business owners who were thinking about selling their business. So part of those, some of the members of that team that I talked to you about earlier, sell-side advisor was part of a group that he was asked to speak at. And so he asked me to join him. Same with the CPA group that did our quality of earnings. They asked me to join them in a talk as well. It's separate events. And the people who were attending that event, both of those events, asked some really interesting questions once we opened it for Q&A at the end. And then when we were done, they come up to me throughout the day asking these questions and giving me kind of feedback and comments on the talk. And I thought, this is very interesting. These questions are pretty consistent. You know, it's not like people are asking me far off questions that I have no clue how to answer. This is basic stuff that I kind of take for granted that I know because I've lived in the exit world quite a bit. And then hearing what a lot of the people talking at those events were saying, and this is no slight on them whatsoever, but a lot of them have never sold a company. They're experts in like wealth management or, financial preparation and the deal side, but nobody was really talking to the heart of what these founders are probably really wanting to know. And also, us entrepreneurs, we kind of have our own language too. And it's almost, you're hearing terminology from these speakers and lingo that's kind of native to the PE space or to the, financial space or the tax preparation space. And so no one's really talking to the heart of these entrepreneurs. And so I had the idea there, not so much to write a book. I think I had the idea for Waypoint is what I really had, which was how can I maybe put something together to where I can create a space for entrepreneurs, business owners who are thinking about selling to ask the questions they don't know the answers to, and to not step into the traps that are littered along the path, and to make sure that they get an extraordinary exit like I did. And I made several notes and then come home and sat on it for a while and then had an idea, maybe I should write a book about the whole process of what I went through selling my business. So one thing led to another. I started making a draft outline and some chapter ideas, and it really just kind of flowed. And it was like, this is going to be a book where I get vulnerable about the roller coaster of deciding to sell, and then the grueling exercise of going through an exit from, for a full 12 months and all the steps along the way. And it's not just about the emotional side. It's also very much about the tactical side and the specifics of what we did, how we prepared, the steps and stages that everything lined up in. And I had kind of that all outlined out, and I still wasn't clear to if I wanted to write the book yet. And I knew I wanted to, I just wasn't ready. And about a month later, I had this thought, maybe I should ask Andy, my sell-side advisor, if he wanted to co-author it with me. Called him up and he did. He immediately said he'd love to. So then we went into it, wrote the book, co-authored it together. And it's a perspective from him selling multiple companies as a sell-side advisor and a CEO. He used to be a CEO for private equity as well. And so he's kind of telling my story from his perspective of as a sell-side advisor and the steps we took. And then I'm telling it from the owner's seat. And we go through it in detail and really tell all the ins and outs of that deal. So I like to think of it as giving a founder or business person a behind the scenes look into the nuts and bolts of an actual deal. And we're not leaving out even the emotional side and the roller coaster that goes along with that. Not aware of any books like this, and I think it's well received and helping people. I've got friends that have read it and told me that it's tremendous help to them. One friend read it who had sold multiple companies and said he wished so bad he would have had a copy years ago before he sold, because he got taken advantage of, and he saw in the book where he got taken advantage of in his deal. So that's the how the book came about. And as far as Waypoint, once we released the book, it just kind of naturally happened, where I'm talking with a lot of entrepreneurs, people that read the book, and they're coming to me with these concerns, with these questions, with these unknowns. And I found myself doing the work of Waypoint before I formed it, right? And so I decided to go
what
into
is
business.
the work exactly? Tell everybody about the work.
I help founders prepare on the personal side. I don't like to say the emotional side, but it does get that way because entrepreneurs a lot of times don't want to say, hey, let's work on your emotional side. But what I mean by that is we get real granular and below the surface on things like, why do you want to sell your business, for example? Because the first answer to that, when you ask someone why you want to sell, is probably not the reason. Now, it can be closely connected to the reason. But yes. But if you get down several layers deep, I take them through an exercise that I call the 7 levels of why. And each answer to why for that question becomes a basis for the next why. And by the time you get 3 or 4 layers deep, you're starting to get to the truth, right? It could be that there's a physical condition that they're concerned about, that they want to make sure they set up their family for financial success after they're gone, right? Or it could be a partner that they're struggling with, and maybe they wouldn't say that in answer to why they want to sell. They could just say, well, I'm just getting tired of the business. Well, then you say, well, okay, so you want to sell because you're getting tired of the business. Why are you getting tired of the business? Right now we're at level 2. Well, it's just starting to become more stressful and I'm just not enjoying it as much. Okay, now we're at level 3. What is getting more stressful about the business than it was before? And if they're honest, they'll say something like, well, I've got a partner who is going through a lot of personal issues and they're just becoming a real pain to deal with at work. And I thought maybe if I just sell the business, it would be the easiest way to end that misery for me and them. So, and then, you keep going layer after layer, and all of a sudden you get into the truth, and a light bulb goes off for the founder, and you realize this is why. And I really love my business, maybe, but if it wasn't for these stressors, I would want to keep it. Well, that's a good, now we've saved you possibly from just selling the business when there might be some other ways around it. So there's that's a simple example of, it can be fill in the blank of any possible scenario, but that's just the why on the business sale. And then there's other exercises we do, and it's a community too of people going through the same thing. We do it all virtual, so they're feeding off each other and getting ideas and solutions to their problem by hearing how someone else worked through their own. So
that's the whole purpose of this podcast, actually, is learning from each other. And I want to go back because I gave some advice to somebody the other day, and I just want to reiterate it because it just came out of your mouth, which is I was advising somebody the other day who's had multiple offers on their business, and they said, I have a guy who has sold a business, and so he's going to advise me. And I heard you say, Jonathan, I've sold multiple businesses and I would still get a professional, experienced sell-side advisor. And that's what I said. There is, because you sold a business does not mean you know the ins and outs of all the traps, and particularly in scenarios with very savvy buyers.
That's for sure.
That you are going to come up against, right?
Yes.
So that's number one. Number two is, before you engage in those conversations, have that group of other advisors that you mentioned, a wealth advisor, a great CPA, an M&A attorney. I've never heard a presentation coach. I think that's a remarkable idea. That's fantastic. If you think you could get better than you are now at that, or how to tell the story, that's a great advisor to have. But the other thing is, I said, if all these deals fall apart, and they're likely to, because the vast majority of deals do fall apart, it seems like we decide to sell our company, and then 12 months later, we've had a sale. The vast majority of these fall through, right?
Yeah.
Don't see that as a failure or a mark on the complexion of what it is that you built. It's really a learning experience, right? It's not an indicator that you don't have a great company or you don't have a company worth selling. It's an indicator that you have not prepared all the things that you need to prepare to mitigate risk for the buyer. And that's the lesson to learn. Is not like, 100%. Oh, I give up, I'm just going to, walk away or whatever. It's, what is the lesson I should be taking from this for the next time I have this experience, right?
Absolutely. And a good sell-side advisor is going to tell you before you ever start that process in your early calls, is this a sellable company? And are there things that need to be done to it to make it, to maximize that value? So if you have a sellable company, then there's only one other thing that could make the deal fall apart. One other main thing, I should say, and that would be you giving up on it partway through, getting burnt out partway through, getting scared and like, I don't know what I'm going to do after. So there's some things that you can do ahead of time to establish and get very clear on yourself to keep that deal from falling apart. And then you got to hire someone who's going to tell you the truth and help you get that business ready if it's not ready. And they're going to be in charge of carrying that through to the very end and getting you in front of the right buyers that are going to bring their maximum value. And they're going to run a competitive bid for you to make sure that you're getting the absolute maximum value out of that deal. And all of your must-haves, which are things you write down ahead of time, and even your like-to-haves, things you would like to have if in a perfect world. And some of them you'll get if you get the right advisor. I got all of my must-haves and all of my like-to-haves. But there again, it starts with preparation. And if you don't know where to start, don't have a clue, there's people out there that can help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that just kind of hits me about that whole thing is, don't waste your money hiring somebody who is paid to tell you the truth. And if you're not ready to be coachable, that's part of the emotional part of readiness, right?
Yeah.
Don't treat every criticism of the business as somebody telling you your baby's ugly. They're really working in your best interest. And, people assume that the word criticism is inherently negative. That's not what the word means, right? So if you're not ready to be coachable by an advisor like that, just be satisfied with whatever you get, right? Because if you're not emotionally ready to be coachable and to hear some of these maybe difficult truths about things that need to happen, don't waste it's like I say to people, if you're not willing to walk away from a deal, don't bother negotiating. Just give them what they want. It's the same kind of thing. Yeah. if you're gonna hire somebody that's paid to tell you the truth, and you're not prepared to be coachable, why waste your money with that?
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense.
Ego and pride can destroy deals. Yes, there's examples of that in the book that Andy talks about, of deals that almost went off the rails, and we're talking tens of millions of dollars in valuation. I think one deal was maybe $100 million, and the founder was offended that the buyer was offering him a board seat for $60,000 a year or something like that, because he's like, I'm worth more than that. Right.
Right.
And meanwhile, they're paying him $100 million for his business.
Yeah.
So,
you're worth $100 million. At this point,
Yeah.
60,000 is really irrelevant.
So
right?
he was offended by that and almost walked away from the deal. And his advisor, Andy, had a good conversation with him and helped him see. And thankfully, he was humble enough to receive that and got through with a great deal. But yeah,
well,
that's
we're not.
being coachable.
We're not. It takes a certain amount of ego to even have the grit to start a company and run a company to a point where you've built something that you can sell.
Yep.
Right.
So true.
Just don't allow that to be a handicap.
That's right.
At this really critical point in your life.
I totally agree.
Yeah. What else, Jonathan? What do you wish I'd have asked you?
Well, there's, it's the sell side is a complicated process, and I think we've covered a lot of the high level stuff in there. I think just the team piece is so important, and getting the right people there on that. And I have things like, even on my website, called an assessment, a exit readiness assessment. And that's something people can do just to see, and they get the result. It's not tying them to me. They get the result without putting in an email or anything if they don't want to. But there's things like that people can do to, even if you are 5 or 10 years out and you're like, one day I want to sell, I wonder how ready I am. That's a good little thing to work through, and it'll give you a score.
Now, is this how ready are you, or how ready is the business, or both?
It's mostly about you, and there's tons of them out there for the business readiness side.
Yeah, I think we still have one on our site.
Yeah, but on the personal side, I haven't really seen too many. A lot of the business side will have a couple points in there about the personal, but mine is pretty much all on that. But that's a piece of it. And I think the book is such a great way for people to read in 4 or 5 hours, or however long it takes to read it. It's also on Audible, but to really understand what really goes on in a deal, in a process. And it's in easy to understand terms. Simple people like me can read it and understand it. So,
Well, that's amazing. I've had guests on the podcast in the past. I think there's a recent one, Paul Isdiak, who vets companies for PE. So if you're not sure what companies look at when they're looking to purchase a company, particularly a PE firm, that's a good podcast to go listen to. But I think Jonathan's got an amazing point of view around being prepared emotionally for what you go through when you sell a company. So the book is The Extraordinary Exit, and we'll have it on the show notes. And your organization is Waypoint Founders. Tell people how to get with you, Jonathan.
Yeah, just go to waypointfounders.com, and the book's information is on there, and everything that we do is on there, as well as the assessment they can take with no obligation there. And if going back to your prior question, I did think of one more thing that I think is super important, that is a very common trap for a lot of founders, is they get approached by interested buyers, unsolicited, And some of them, many times they'll come in there and ask for some basic information, and then they will throw a number at you. And that they're saying your business is worth, and we would pay you for this. And it's tempting sometimes those numbers are very attractive, and it's tempting to just follow along and kind of be drug along, but you are not in the driver's seat in that deal whatsoever. You are very vulnerable, and almost probably 99.9% of those deals, that number gets cut by 20 to 30%, if it even goes through at all. And the terms of the deal are almost never agreeable or your ideal terms.
Never in your favor. Yeah.
They want you to finance part of it. They want you to leave equity in the business, earnouts and all kinds of creative things they do to structure that deal. And it's one of those deals, you'll very likely fall into that 90% category that profoundly regret it within a year or so. So just be very aware of that. And if you have someone approach you that you like, that, hey, this could be a really good deal for me, I would like to sell to them, still get a sell side advisor and let them handle that. Because what will happen is that buyer will shape up and they'll realize, okay, I really want this business, but we are not going to pull the wool over these people. They've got to figure it out, and they've got good representation. So that would just be kind of a closing point too, that it's very common out there, and I hate seeing people get trapped into that.
Me too. And like you, I've seen people who've built great businesses, had poor advisors, and are either working for somebody now or have started a new business when they should be on a beach, on a golf course, on a boat, wherever it is they would like to be.
It's true.
Rather than where they are. And like you, that is part of the reason for what we do today, is that's just unacceptable to me.
Yep.
After you've spent 20 and 30 years building a business, you should get the fruits of that effort. And so don't rip yourself off by not getting good advice, by not understanding, and getting some coaching or counseling as to who you're going to be after that deal. Put the right advisors around you. And this is a time in your life to be coachable.
It's true.
If you have the right folks around you. So, Jonathan, it was an absolute pleasure spending time with you. And thank you for what you do today for founders. This is really something from your heart, and is probably not your long-term thing, but is just kind of until your next adventure, right?
I think so. And I think it's something I really enjoy doing, and very good chance it'll be something I do right on, even when I'm starting another company or buying another company, because this is something I genuinely care about. So,
well, we appreciate you. All righty.
Thank you.
Reach out to Jonathan and get his book. It's wonderful.
That's a wrap for this episode of CEOs Unscripted, where real talk fuels real growth. I hope today's conversation gave you fresh insights and inspiration for your own leadership journey. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a candid conversation with a trailblazing leader. Until next time, keep leading with intention, growing with grit, and driving for results. I'm Jane Gentry, and this is CEOs Unscripted. See you next time.